I woke up to find a neon orange violation, notice nailed to my barn door. Unauthorized livestock, it read. Confused, I glanced over at my fenced-in pasture. My cows, my land, my rules. Or so I thought. By the end of the week, I had 37 violation notices, an outrageous fine, and a power-hungry HOA president named Karen, who had one goal: steal my farm right out from under me. But what she didn't realize was that I had no intention of backing down. And by the time I was done, she'd be begging to leave town. I woke up to the sound of my rooster crowing. Just like every other morning, the air was crisp, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, and the smell of fresh earth filled my lungs as I stepped out onto my porch with a hot cup of coffee. It should have been a peaceful start to the day. But instead, my stomach dropped the moment I saw the bright orange notice nailed to my barn door. Frowning, I set my coffee down on the railing and made my way across the yard. The paper flapped slightly in the breeze, mocking me as I yanked it off the nail. Notice of violation, unauthorized livestock. I blinked. What the hell did that even mean? My eyes scanned the page, reading the fine print. Something about my animals not being permitted under the community's bylaws, and a warning that I had 7 days to comply or face fines. I let out a short, humorless laugh. This had to be a mistake. I'd lived on this land for 15 years. No one had ever told me what I could or couldn't do with my property. This farm was mine, bought and paid for, every square inch of it. I crumpled the paper in my fist, shaking my head. Some idiot must have gotten the wrong address. Maybe one of those cookie-cutter suburbs a few miles away had some new HOA rules, and some overworked clerk had put my name in by mistake. Whatever. Not my problem. I shoved the notice into my pocket and got back to work, brushing it off like an annoying mosquito. The cows needed feeding. The fence by the east pasture needed repairs, and I had no time for nonsense. By mid-afternoon, I had completely forgotten about it, until she showed up. I was hauling a sack of feed from my truck when I saw the dust cloud from a car pulling up my driveway. That alone was odd. I didn't get unexpected visitors out here. The car, a shiny silver sedan, rolled to a stop near my barn, and then she stepped out. A middle-aged woman in a stiff navy blazer, pressed khaki pants, and a pair of sunglasses way too expensive for a place like this. A clipboard clutched to her chest like it was some kind of weapon. Her hair was an unnatural shade of blonde, cut into the sharpest bob I'd ever seen, and her lips were pursed so tightly they nearly disappeared. She walked toward me like she owned the damn place. I set the sack of feed down and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Can I help you?" The woman pulled off her sunglasses, revealing a pair of cold, judgmental eyes that swept over my farm like she had already decided it was an abomination. "I assume you've received your notice," she said, tapping the clipboard. "Yeah, and I assume it was a mistake," I replied. Her lips curled into a smug little smirk. "No mistake. Your farm is now under the jurisdiction of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, and as per our bylaws, your livestock is in violation of our community's standards." I stared at her. Then I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was too ridiculous. "Lady, I think you got the wrong place. This is a farm. It's always been a farm. It was a farm before I got here, and it's going to be a farm long after you leave." Her smirk didn't budge. "Things change. The HOA has recently expanded its jurisdiction due to new zoning ordinances. Your property now falls within our boundaries, and that means you are expected to comply with all rules and regulations." I folded my arms. I didn't sign up for any HOA. She gave me a condescending little chuckle, like I was some simpleton who didn't understand how the world worked. "You don't have to. The county approved the expansion. It's all perfectly legal." My blood started to simmer. "So let me get this straight. You're saying that after 15 years, suddenly, some HOA thinks they can tell me what to do with my own land?" Her eyes gleamed with pure, unfiltered arrogance. "That's exactly what I'm saying." I shook my head, letting out a long breath. "Yeah, no, that's not happening." She raised an eyebrow. "If you refuse to comply, you'll be subject to daily fines. Those fines will accumulate, and if left unpaid, the HOA has the legal authority to place a lien on your property." That made me pause. Not because I believed her, but because I knew HOA horror stories. People losing their homes over petty nonsense. Neighborhoods being strong-armed into compliance by power-hungry board members. And the way she was standing there, smirking like a predator that had just spotted an easy meal, told me that she had done this before. I clenched my jaw. You don't own my land. And no piece of paper is going to change that. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. We'll see about that. She turned on her heel, marched back to her car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and a bad feeling in my gut. I watched her go, my fists tightening at my sides. I had dealt with my fair share of trouble over the years. Bad weather, broken equipment, even the occasional greedy developer trying to buy me out. But this was a whole new level of bullshit. Karen, or whatever her name was, thought she could come onto my land and dictate my life. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The next morning, I stepped out onto my porch, stretching as the cool morning air filled my lungs. The sky was just starting to lighten. The birds were waking up, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe yesterday's nonsense was over. Then I saw them, bright orange violation notices. 4 of them. 1 slapped onto my tractor's windshield. Another nailed to my barn door, just like the first one. A 3rd stapled onto my fence post. And the last one, stuffed right into my mailbox, which, by the way, was illegal as hell. My stomach burned as I ripped the nearest one off my fence and read it. Violation, unapproved structure. Your fence does not meet the aesthetic guidelines of the Willow Creek HOA. Fine, $250 per day until corrected. Aesthetic guidelines? This was a working farm, not a damn country club. I yanked the next notice off my tractor. Violation, improper storage. All vehicles must be kept in enclosed garages. Fine, $200 per day. I let out a bitter laugh. Enclosed garages? What? Did she expect me to build a 3-car garage for my farm equipment? The notice on the barn was just as ridiculous. Excessive animal noise. Livestock must not create a nuisance. Fine, $150 per day. At this point, I was grinding my teeth. What did she want me to do? Teach my cows to whisper. By the time I got to the last one, I already knew it would be complete and utter bullshit. Grass too long. All properties must maintain a uniform lawn height under HOA regulations. Fine, $100 per day. I stood there, gripping the crumpled up violations in my fist, my blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't just about some bogus rule enforcement. This was targeted harassment. And I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen. I wasn't about to sit around and let her play this game. So I went straight to the county records office. It took me less than 10 minutes to find what I already knew deep down. There was no HOA tied to my land. Not now. Not ever. Which meant Karen was full of shit. I made a copy of the records and drove straight to her office. The Willow Creek HOA operated out of a tiny, overpriced rental space in one of those new suburban shopping centers, the kind with yoga studios, wine bars, and overpriced home decor stores. I walked in, gripping the papers in my hands so tight my knuckles turned white. Karen was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, because of course she was sipping coffee from a custom HOA president mug. The moment she saw me, she smirked. "Ah," she said, setting her coffee down. "I had a feeling you'd be stopping by." I tossed the papers onto her desk. "You're lying. My farm isn't part of your HOA." She barely glanced at them before folding her hands on the desk, like she was some kind of queen sitting on a throne. "The county is still updating their public records," she said smoothly. "But trust me, it's all been approved." I felt a growl build in my throat. "Trust you? That's funny, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to run a scam." Karen just smiled, that same smug expression she always wore. "You can fight it all you want," she said, tilting her head. "But here's the thing. You'll drown in fines before you win." I clenched my fists. "You can't fine me for rules that don't apply to me." Her eyes sparkled like she was enjoying this. "Oh, but I already have. And guess what? If those fines go unpaid long enough, they turn into a lien on your property." I stiffened. She wanted me to lose my farm. It clicked all at once. This wasn't about some power trip. It wasn't about rules or community standards. Karen wanted my land. She wanted me to bleed money fighting this until I had no choice but to sell. And then, once I was gone, she and her little HOA would scoop up my farm for next to nothing. That's why she wasn't backing down. That's why she looked so damn smug. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Good luck with that, I said coldly, because I'm not going anywhere. I turned and walked out before I could say something that would get me arrested. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong, because Karen wasn't just hitting me with bogus fines. She was actively sabotaging my farm. It started small. A delivery truck carrying my cattle feed never showed up. When I called a supplier, they told me they'd been informed that my farm was no longer accepting deliveries. The next day, a shipment of tools and supplies I had ordered was mysteriously returned to sender. Then I found out she was spreading lies to my neighbors, telling them that my farm was bringing down property values and that I was refusing to comply with new regulations. Some of them believed her, the ones who had moved in recently. Families who bought homes near my land because they wanted the country aesthetic, but didn't actually want to live next to a real working farm. One couple even had the audacity to stop me on the road and say, "You know, maybe you should just consider selling. It'd be better for the community." Better for the community? Better for Karen, you mean? I gritted my teeth and drove home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew one thing for sure. Karen was playing dirty. But if she thought I was going to roll over and let her take my farm, she had another thing coming. I was done playing nice. Karen wanted a war? Fine. She was about to get one. The first thing I did was document everything. Every single violation notice, every fine, every shady attempt to sabotage my farm. I took photos, recorded dates, and saved every letter she sent. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. I needed proof that Karen and her HOA goons were fabricating violations. So I went a step further. I installed hidden cameras around my property. Not the obvious kind. Real security cameras cost too much anyway. Instead, I got cheap motion-activated wildlife cameras and hid them where no one would think to look. One in the old oak tree facing my driveway. Another tucked into the rafters of my barn. A third zip-tied under my tractor's canopy. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. That very night, the cameras caught two men sneaking onto my property. Karen's goons. They were stapling new violation notices onto my barn and tractor, taking fake photos to make it look like my property was violating some bogus HOA rules. One of them even kicked over a feed bucket, snapped a picture, and wrote up a violation for improper waste management. Unbelievable. I sat in my truck the next morning, reviewing the footage on my laptop, feeling my anger boil over. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was fraud. So I took my evidence straight to the county zoning office. The guy at the front desk barely looked up when I walked in. Take a number. I didn't. I walked straight to the counter and slapped the printed photos on the desk. I need to report illegal HOA activity. That got his attention. He frowned, glancing down at the images. "What's this?" "Evidence," I said. "Your system says my farm isn't in an HOA. But these people are finding me trespassing on my land and faking violations." He flipped through the papers, then let out a long breath. "Wait here," he said, before disappearing into the back. I waited and waited. 15 minutes passed before a higher-up official came out, a short, balding man with a nervous look on his face. He shook my hand like he didn't want to, then sat down across from me. "Sir, I understand your concern, but this is a civil matter. You'll have to take it up with the HOA." I felt my stomach drop. Something was off. I leaned forward. "There's no HOA on my land, and I just handed you proof that these people are breaking the law." The official adjusted his tie, avoiding my eyes. "Well, these kinds of disputes take time to investigate." There it was. Hesitation. Avoidance. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even concerned. I narrowed my eyes. "Has Karen been paying you off?" The man's face turned red. "Sir, I don't appreciate that accusation." I stood up. "Yeah, I bet you don't." I grabbed my documents and walked out. This was bigger than I thought. Karen wasn't just running some petty HOA scam. She had people on the inside. And if I wanted to beat her, I had to hit back harder. The next morning, things got worse. My power went out. I called the electric company. They told me my account had been flagged for non-payment, which was complete bullshit because I had auto pay set up. I spent 2 hours on the phone before someone finally admitted it. We received an order from the Willow Creek HOA to suspend service. My grip tightened on the phone. Read my address again. A pause. Then the woman hesitated. Oh, it appears your property is actually outside of their jurisdiction. No kidding. I snapped, turned my damn power back on. She apologized, said it would take 48 hours, and hung up. I sat in silence for a long time, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This wasn't a coincidence. Karen was escalating. That afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. A deep, distorted voice spoke. Take the buyout before it gets worse. A chill ran down my spine. Who is this? I demanded. They hung up. I stared at my phone. Karen was getting desperate. And when people like her get desperate, they get sloppy. That night, I made sure my rifle was loaded, just in case. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee when I heard it, rustling, near the barn. I grabbed my flashlight, moving quietly. When I rounded the corner, my breath caught Karen, standing by my barn with a can of spray paint in her hand. The words unsafe were already half finished across my wall. She froze, caught red-handed. I clicked on my flashlight, the bright beam blinding her. Karen. My voice was calm, too calm. She whirled around, dropping the spray can. Oh, this isn't what it looks like. I stepped closer, my boots crunching the dirt. Really? Because it looks like you're trying to stage a reason to condemn my barn. Karen forced a smile, backing up. Now, let's not be hasty. I cut her off. Let me guess. Next, you were going to report my barn to the county? Claim it was a safety hazard? Try to get it demolished? She swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about. I took another step. Cameras say otherwise. Her eyes widened. I nodded. That's right. I put up cameras. You really should have thought this through. She spun on her heel and bolted for her car. I didn't stop her. I just stood there, watching as she scrambled inside, fumbled with the keys, and peeled out of my driveway so fast she nearly took out my mailbox. My pulse finally slowed. Karen had made a mistake, and now I had everything I needed to take her down. I was done letting Karen control the game. If she wanted to play dirty, I was going to set a trap that she couldn't talk her way out of. So I gave her what she wanted, an excuse to trespass. First, I built a small wooden shed right near the fence line. It wasn't even a real shed, just some plywood, a few nails, and a cheap tarp on top. It looked just unfinished enough to make her itch to write a violation for it. Then I made sure she'd take the bait. I called a few neighbors, the ones who weren't completely brainwashed by Karen's lies, and made a big show about how I was building something new on my land. By the next afternoon, word had spread, and I knew for a fact that Karen was listening. Now all I had to do was wait. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. But my truck was parked farther back, out of sight. My motion cameras were rolling. And most importantly, I had called the sheriff. Because Karen wasn't just writing fake violations anymore. She was trespassing. She was vandalizing my property. And this time, the law was on my side. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I saw it. A set of headlights creeping down the road, then shutting off right near my property line. A car door clicked open softly. Then I saw her. Karen, clipboard in hand, flashlight in the other. I could barely contain my satisfaction as she slinked onto my property, walking straight toward the fake shed. She circled it, muttering to herself, probably thinking up the biggest fine she could slap on me. Then she did something even dumber. She pulled a crowbar out her bag and started ripping off one of the wooden boards. That was it. The moment she started destroying my property, I stepped off the porch. But before I could even say a word, red and blue lights flooded the night. Freeze. Hands where we can see them. Karen spun around, completely stunned as a sheriff and 2 deputies came walking up the driveway. She dropped the crowbar like it burned her. I was just... The sheriff cut her off. Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property, and it looks like you just vandalized this man's shed. Karen tried to backpedal. I was issuing a violation. This structure is unapproved. It violates HOA standards. The sheriff turned to me. This an HOA property? I crossed my arms. Nope. County records prove it. She's been lying. Karen's face drained of color. But this is my jurisdiction. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. The sheriff didn't even blink. Ma'am, what you have is a right to remain silent. And with that, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Karen completely lost it. No, you can't arrest me. I was just enforcing the rules. I have authority. Handcuffs. Karen was screaming, kicking as the deputies dragged her toward the squad car. I was just trying to save the community. This is a mistake. I'll have your badge for this. The sheriff looked completely unbothered. Ma'am, you have the right to an attorney, but I'd focus on finding a good one. I leaned against my fence, watching her get shoved into the back of the car. She made one last desperate attempt at control, turning to me through the window. You think this is over? I have connections. I'll destroy you. You hear me? You're finished. I smiled. No, Karen, you are. The car door slammed shut, muffling the rest of her tantrum. And just like that, HOA Karen was going to jail. But I wasn't done yet. The moment Karen was hauled off in handcuffs, I knew I had won the battle. But I wasn't interested in just winning. I wanted to burn her entire corrupt empire to the ground. And that meant taking down her HOA. I started with Karen's violations. Every bogus fine she had hit me with, I dug through the paper trail. With my lawyer's help, I found something big. Karen wasn't just issuing fake violations. She was running an entire extortion scheme. The HOA had fined over a dozen other homeowners for things that weren't in any official rulebook. Those fines? Never deposited into an HOA account. They were being wired into a private account, Karen's. A closer look at HOA expense reports showed thousands of dollars missing. Karen had been pocketing money for years. And it got worse. I started calling around, talking to people who had moved away from the area. One woman, an elderly widow, broke down crying on the phone. Karen had bullied her into selling her house below market value, hitting her with fake violations until she gave up and moved. Then guess what? Karen's cousin magically bought the house a week later. That's when I realized this was bigger than me. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry HOA tyrant. She was running a real estate scam. Now I had financial proof that Karen had been stealing from homeowners. But I needed one final piece to make this case bulletproof. So I looked into the county officials who had ignored my complaints earlier. I got lucky. One of my old buddies from high school worked at the county clerk's office. I bought him a beer, asked some casual questions. And then he let something slip. Karen had bribed county officials. She had paid off zoning officers to get certain properties flagged for violations. She had used county resources to push people out of their homes. And suddenly it all made sense. That's why the officials brushed me off. That's why my power was shut off. Karen had friends in high places, but she wasn't smart enough to cover her tracks. And now I had everything I needed to take her and her HOA down for good. The next morning, I walked straight into a law firm and the local news station. First stop, my lawyer. I dumped everything I had on his desk. Bank statements, fake fines, bribery reports, even Karen's own handwriting on some of the fake violations. He looked at the pile, then back at me. How deep do you want to go with this? He asked. I grinned. All the way. Then I took the same files to Channel 6 News. They ate it up. A corrupt HOA president running a real estate scam? This was gold for local news. Within 24 hours, the story was everywhere. HOA president under investigation for fraud and bribery. Local homeowners speak out. She stole from us. People who had been scared of Karen for years finally spoke up. The dam had broken, and the fallout? It was brutal. The next week was pure chaos for Karen's little HOA. The county opened an investigation. Officials she had bribed? They flipped on her immediately. The HOA board resigned one by one, trying to avoid getting caught in the mess. A judge froze the HOA's bank accounts. No more fines. No more power. Homeowners started a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. It passed with a 98% vote. Within 2 months, the HOA was gone, legally dissolved, wiped off the map. Karen's little empire turned to dust. Karen had been out on bail, probably thinking she could smooth talk her way out of trouble. She was dead wrong. First came the lawsuits. I sued her for harassment, trespassing, and damages. Other homeowners sued her for fraud and illegal fines. The state hit her with felony charges for embezzlement and bribery. Karen's house of cards collapsed overnight. She tried to sell her house fast, but no one wanted to buy from the criminal ex-HOA president. The bank took it instead. Foreclosed. By the time her court hearing started, Karen was broke. She had no money, no power, and nowhere to go. And then she skipped town. Gone. Vanished like she had never even existed. I woke up one morning a few weeks later, stepped onto my porch with my coffee, and looked across the street. And there it was, Karen's house, with a big fat for sale sign in the yard. I took a long sip of my coffee and smiled. Justice. My farm? Still standing strong. No HOA. No fake fines. No power-hungry tyrants. Just me, my land, and the freedom Karen tried to steal from me. And as I sat there, listening to my cows moo in the distance, I knew one thing for sure. No one would ever try to take my home from me again.